Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of April of 2023. Today we have a lot of things to talk about, so let's start. And mainly, this video we're going to discuss and talk about the upcoming counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side. Today a lot of important, popular and powerful persons talk about upcoming counter-offensive operation. One of them was Prigozhin, the head of Wagner's, who's currently are trying to capture the last part of the Bakhmut and so on. And he told us that he expects that Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation before the 15th of May. So somewhere in 2 weeks, the Ukrainians are going to launch their greatest counter-offensive operation. Of course, from one side, we can say that this is some kind of PR move or something like this, or else maybe the Prigozhin wanted and asked and were trying to force and push the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation to give him more weapon, more shells, more missiles, more rocket, more manpower and so on, because we know that he has some problem with this. And he told us about this, that he has a problem with this. So maybe that was some kind of a game trying to force the Minister of Defense to give him more weapon. But today there was another person who talked about the upcoming counteroffensive operation, and currently I'm talking about the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. He told us that the greatest counteroffensive operation of the Ukrainians is going to take place, and this counteroffensive operation is going to take place very soon. He told us that no matter whether the Western countries are going to provide the Ukrainians F-16 or not, the Ukrainians are going to launch this counteroffensive operation. And this is very important, because if such a piece of news are given by a person with such a high level as the President Zelensky, that means that no matter what is going to happen, the things that he told us is going to happen 100%. So at least 2 persons were talking about the greatest counteroffensive operation from the Ukrainian side in the nearest future. We talk a lot, and I believe that the Military Summary channel is not the only channel that provided a lot of information about the upcoming counteroffensive operation. We talk about the positive and negative sides of this counteroffensive operation for the Russians, for the Ukrainians. And the main question we still have is what exactly the Ukrainians are afraid of to launch this counteroffensive operation, and what kind of connection does F-16 have with entire counteroffensive operation? What is about F-16? Why Zelensky told us today that no matter whether the Western countries are going to give the Ukrainians F-16s or not, they will start this counteroffensive operation. And to tell the truth, this is a very important detail about the F-16. I believe that this is one of the most important details about the upcoming greatest counteroffensive operation. So let's go step by step, and I'll try to explain to you everything, and you will understand the difficulties that Ukrainians are going to face during the upcoming counteroffensive operation, and what they're planning and what they're trying to solve currently before the launching of this operation. We talk a lot about this operation, and the question is what the Ukrainians are afraid of. Of course, some of you can say and can tell, and you will be completely right, that Ukrainians are afraid of a significant level of trenches and fortifications in this area. There is a map for these purposes was created. I believe that this map is not updated, and that this map show us not the current situation. I believe that there are much more level of trenches and fortifications in this area. But anyway, if we take a look at this map, we understand that Ukrainians are going to face significant level of defense from the Russian side. And some of you can say that this is the main reason why the Ukrainians are afraid to launch their counteroffensive operation, and you will be right. This is a very important factor, but this is a regular situation. Believe me, when the Wagners were trying us, they're still trying, when the Wagners almost every single day were trying to capture Bakhmut, they were facing the same level of fortification. There is nothing special or nothing that nobody faced before. This is a normal situation in a military, in a war. When if you are going to attack, believe me, you need to expect that you will face a significant level of fortifications. Yes, this is a very big factor and terrible situation for the Ukrainians, and they understand the level of losses that they will face during the upcoming offensive operation, but this is a normal military situation. Another people can say, another group, the second group of this topic of counteroffensive operation may say that the most important and the game changer that can prevent or reduce the possibilities of the Ukrainians during the upcoming counteroffensive operation is the guided bombs. And they will be right and correct as well. Guided bombs is a game changer from the Russian side. But there is one important thing when we're talking about guided bombs. The best accuracy and the best they can bring as much as possible results only in case when you're trying to attack the standalone targets and static targets, not dynamic targets. If you have like waves of dynamic targets, the accuracy and effectiveness of guided bombs is close to zero. Because for example, when there is a static front line, no movements, you know where is the trenches, you know where is the position of your enemy, like Ugledar. For example, we know that the Russians are using guided bombs in Ugledar, in the vicinity of Ugledar massively. And the main reason of that is because the Russians are trying to erase this town and to erase every single building in this town. So this is the perfect way, perfect solution for the usage of guided bombs. But when the Ukrainians launches their counter-offensive operation, there are going to be endless numbers of dynamic waves that are not going to stand at the same position for a very long time. So the effectiveness and accuracy of guided bombs will be reduced to zero. Another group of people can say that the main barrier for the Ukrainians in this area is going to be the Russian forces that they managed to mobilize, to train, and to deploy in this area. And they will be correct as well. Of course, significant number of forces that the Russians managed to deploy in this area is a very powerful argument during the upcoming counteroffensive operation. I'm not sure about the number of Russian forces that they managed to deploy in this area, but I believe that there are a lot of them. Maybe 100,000, maybe less. It doesn't matter. Anyway, they have significant numbers of reserves that are located in Rostov-na-Donu, in Crimea, that they can send with endless waves as well. But from the other side, we understand that this is also a normal military situation. Believe me, Wagner's in Bakhmut faced the same picture. They're storming this area, and as we discussed many times, that between Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Drushkovka and Konstantinovka, the Ukrainians managed to deploy up to 80,000 soldiers. So that means that the number of forces doesn't play significant role during the upcoming counteroffensive operation. I don't think that Wagner's have 80,000 soldiers. I think that Ukrainians have more. But anyway, no matter the number and the ratio between the Wagners and the Ukrainians, we still see that Wagners are advancing. So the number of forces, of course, it plays significant and maybe the major role in any conflict on any front line. But we had a lot of examples in the past when the number meant nothing. And sometimes tactic and strategic and the types of weapon you use plays a bigger role than anything else. So the question is, what exactly the Ukrainians are afraid of? Why they still haven't launched their counter-offensive operation? Maybe the final group can tell that the main reason is the weather. We talk a lot about the quality of the ground, about the poor quality on the ground, that Ukrainians' armored vehicles and tanks will stuck in the mud in this area, and so on. Of course, this is also some kind of truth. But believe me, this is not the main factor. It will cause problems, but this situation will cause problems for both sides, either for the Russians or for the Ukrainians. Because if the Ukrainians launch their counter-offensive operation, the Russians will be forced to bring their reserves and forces, tanks, armored vehicles using the same fields. Maybe not on the north, but on the south, but they're going to be the same situation. So what is F-16 about? What is the question? What is the main problem? And now we're coming to the most important factor that Ukrainians are afraid of. And I'm talking not about tanks, not about guided bombs, not about significant level of fortifications in this area, not about the poor quality of the ground and so on, a number of the forces. Remember that there is one thing that Ukrainians are afraid of most of all before the greatest counteroffensive operation. And I'm talking about the naval forces of Russian Federation that are currently deployed on Crimea. And not talking about boats and about, I don't know, some small ships. There is a real fleet in Crimea. The real fleet. There are a lot of submarines. Of course, the Russians lost their main ship during the previous year, the cruiser Moscow. But believe me, they still have a lot of naval forces in this area. And the thing is that if the Ukrainians take a decision to launch their greatest counter-offensive operation from Orekhov, Gulyai-Polye, Velika Nosilovka to the south, trying to split this area in two parts, so let's assume that this is, let's say, the line where the Ukrainians are going to accumulate their forces, and they will launch this counter-offensive operation all over the front line, going to the south, from Orekhov, from Gulyai-Polye, from Velika Novoselovka, from Kurakhove in direction of Vuhledar. The Ukrainians will launch the marine operation in direction of Energodar, trying to establish control over the Zaporozhye power plant. The Ukrainians will try to, let's say, to unblock Nikolaev port by doing this marine operation. The Ukrainians will try to attack and capture the islands along the Dnipro River. All the things. The Russians will have one answer to this situation. When talking about the western part, I believe they will be able to reduce the danger or critical situation in this area using the ground forces. But when talking about south of Ukraine, the Russians have another line of defense, and I'm talking about naval forces. They will deploy their naval ships along the Azov Sea, and using all type of weapon they have, the mighty of the naval forces of Russian Federation, they will attack the storming and attacking Ukrainian forces. They will destroy everything that moves to the south, everything. And they have submarines, they have ships, big ships, small ships. They have a lot of forces, a lot of things to do this. And the main problem for the Ukrainians, and they understand this, that currently, and this is exactly that the Ukrainians are trying to do, and they were trying to do this recently during these months and the previous months, they were trying to destroy the Russian naval forces. And they understand that if the Russians will deploy their forces in Azov Sea, this is going to be something like untouchable. The Ukrainians don't have solution how to destroy the Russian fleet in this area. And during the previous months, they were testing the weapon they have, trying to find a solution what to do. So there are a lot of ways, of course, how to destroy Russian fleet, or at least to make this fleet out of the game. And the most obvious one is to destroy the Russian naval forces. And for these purposes, during the previous months, the Ukrainians were sending a lot of surface drones in direction of Sevastopol, in direction of all these ports, trying to destroy the Russian fleets. But all their attempts were defeated, and the Russians managed to save the Russian fleet. And the most important thing, they understand that when the Ukrainians are going to launch the counter-offensive operation, mainly they're going to use the grain passage, the grain road, that according to the grain deal, to attack Russian fleet and to get as close as possible. Of course, I'm not saying that there are no chances that Ukrainians are able to destroy Russian fleet. They have chances, and they're going to have more chances if they use the grain deal roads. So this is the reason why the Russians took a decision to block the grain deal and to reduce the possibilities of the Ukrainians to send their fleets surface drones from Odessa and from this bank of the Black Sea. So this is the only purpose, because they understand that the Ukrainians are going to launch. So the Ukrainians made few attempts to destroy Russian fleet, and all of them were defeated. Another thing what the Ukrainians are able to do is to destroy ammo depots in this area using rocket attacks, drone attacks, and they did many attempts during the previous months, but also all those attempts were failed. Maybe sometimes the Ukrainians managed to get some ammo depot, and they did manage to get them, and they destroyed few warehouses. Maybe they were testing. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were testing their rocket missile Grom 2. Maybe this is like Ukrainian technology and so on. And the third way is to destroy the Russian fuel depots that are located in Crimea for one purpose, to support the Ukrainian fleet, Russian fleet, my bad. And for example, today, during the previous night, the Ukrainians made another attack in Sevastopol using drones, and they destroyed the fuel depots in this area, very powerful, very big fuel depots. And the Russians, this one, there was, the fire got up to 1,000 square meters in this area, and I believe that they dealt a lot of damage to the logistic and possibilities of the naval forces of Russian Federation. Furthermore, this situation completely explains the Ukrainians' attempt to attack Crimea Bridge. Before, I used to think that using the Grom-2 rockets, missiles and drones, when the Ukrainians were attacking this area, they were trying to get bridge and to destroy this bridge. But currently I understand that the main purpose of those attacks in the area of Kerch and this part of Crimea, the Ukrainians were trying to analyze and understand whether they are able to attack the Russians in this area or not, because currently the Russians are not keeping their forces in their naval fleet in Azov Sea. If they understand that Ukrainians are going to launch, or the Ukrainians have already launched their counter-offensive operation, they will leave the ports in Crimea and then they will send their fleet in this direction. And the only possible way how the Russians are able to enter Azov Sea is using this road under the Crimea Bridge. And the Ukrainians understand that this is the only possible solution and the way how they can, or to close this area and not to allow the Russian fleet to pass by this area, or even to destroy it during the passage. So that was also the reason why, this is also the reason why the Ukrainians are sending significant numbers of spies, RECO groups, commandos, scouts in this area, just with one purpose: to establish a stable connection, stable network that can provide very important information during the upcoming counteroffensive operation on the Ukrainians. And that's it about the situation. And this is the reason why Zelensky was asking the Western countries to provide him F-16, because he understands, he's very smart, by the way. And not just Zelensky, the NATO countries, it's like all this operation was prepared and is preparing by the Western officers, NATO officers and so on. They understand that there is a very high chances that they can't destroy the Russian naval fleet, and we see that they still haven't do this. There is a very high chances that they can't destroy every single fuel depot that the Russians are going to use, or ammo depots with the rockets and missiles that these ships are going to use to stop the Ukraine counteroffensive operation. And they understand that there is one chance, there is another solution how to destroy the Russian fleet. And this is about talking of usage of F-16 aircrafts. To use F-16, and as soon as the Russians move their fleet to Azov Sea, the Ukrainians, of course, under control of Western NATO officers, will use F-16 aircrafts, and F-16 with the modern rockets are able to deal damage to the Russian naval fleet. So this is the story about, and this is what Zelensky was talking about. And as I see, the Western countries are afraid of providing Ukraine the F-16 Air Forces aircrafts. So, but Zelensky told us that he will launch this offensive operation no matter whether the Western countries are going to provide or not. And this situation gives me understanding of the real goals of the Ukrainians during this counter-offensive operation. We know that the Russians don't have nobody has possibility to send fleet to the Black Sea because of a lot of agreements and so on. And there is like the passage to this Black Sea is under the control of Turkey, and there is a lot of international agreements that are not allowed to send fleet during the war, conflict and so on. And the Ukrainians, possibly the real goal, most of the Western countries are saying that the real plans to break the connection between Crimea and the mainland. And now I understand that Ukrainians do have problems with Crimea, with Zaporozhye, but the main problems to the Ukrainians are made by fleet, by Kalibrs rockets, by missiles, by the Russian fleet. So possibly this operation, the entire counteroffensive operation, is not to cut this area and to split the supply roads between Crimea and the mainland. And the main purpose of this operation is to force the Russians to bring their fleet to Azov Sea. Of course, they will be forced to do this because they need to stop the Ukrainian offensive period, this massive hordes of forces that are pushing in endless way to the south. Ukrainians will try to cut this small passage by the rockets Grom 2, trying to cut this area, not to allow the Russian fleet to step back from this area, and using the same rockets or F-16 aircrafts will try to destroy the entire Russian fleet in this area. And believe me, if the Ukrainians are able to destroy the entire Russian fleet, and they are able if they do everything smart, and this is the real plans, believe me, and don't think that the Russians military authorities don't understand this. Believe me, they understand this perfectly. But anyway, they don't have any possibilities not to send the fleet, because this is the only way how to stop the Ukrainians' attack from the north. How to stop these hordes of thousands of soldiers newly created by the Western countries. So this is the trap. And this side is going to win, who is going to be smarter. Because either the Ukrainians understand that the Russians understand that the Ukrainians are going to do, and either the Russians understand that the Ukrainians understand what the Russians are going to do in this situation. So this is going to be a lot of traps. This is going to be a real checkmate game. And we'll see who's going to win, because who is going to win Azov Sea battle is going to win the entire special military operation. Because if the Russians loses their fleet there, their chances to force the Ukrainians to sign peace agreement or to advance will be reduced significantly. Now let's go to the other front lines. And now we're going to talk, of course, about Bakhmut, because I don't remember, and I believe that there were no such numbers since the beginning of the special military operation. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce clashings, storming operation, pushing all over the front line, the Ukrainians lost 575 soldiers, 19 armored vehicles, including 2 tanks, and 3 artillery systems, 1 Akatsa, 1 Gvozdika, and 1 D-30 howitzer. So the losses are significant. To tell the truth, maybe as a result of clashes on the ground, this is the first day with such heavy losses. There were very big losses during the first phase of special military operation, when the Russians were using Kalibrs missiles, Daggers missiles, and so on, and when they were destroying the accumulation of Ukrainian forces in Nikolaev, in Bakhmut, as well in Chasiv Yar, but that was the previous year. And today, these losses tell us the level of losses completely corresponds with the situation on the ground. We see that Ukrainians are stepping back and they're moving to the western part of Bakhmut. Let's return back to the Western sources map. This map has been updated, but this map doesn't show the entire progress. So currently, this is the real picture of Bakhmut for 9 p.m. of the local time. We see that currently the Russians are planning and will try to develop their bridgehead in this area, trying to encircle the western fortification. The Ukrainians will be forced to leave there some rearguard forces, and they will be captured, maybe even killed by the Russians. We'll see, but they don't have any other solution, and I expect that within the next few days the Ukrainians will take a decision to step back. There are going to be no unblocking operation. Maybe the Ukrainians will make some kind of false attack, trying to force the Russians to focus in this area, and meanwhile they will launch their offensive operation in Zaporozhye area, as Prigozhin, the head of Wagner's, reported and told us. Let's go through other front lines. The Russians are saying let's continue with Kherson area. And for example, today the Russians added that as a result of missile attack, they managed to destroy the headquarters of strategical army group Kherson. They haven't provided the piece of information where exactly they managed to do this, because during the previous 48 hours there was just a few known explosions in Nikolaev. We discussed the situation. They reported that 20 higher officers were killed as a result of that attack. In Dnipro, in Uman, the tragedy in Uman, we discussed the situation, and of course in Kiev. So they haven't provided the exact information where that headquarters were destroyed, but this is very important, and I will mention and I will add another thing. The last time when the Russians were attacking Ukraine using missiles so massively was December of 2022. Right, exactly the greatest launch of offensive operation in direction of Solidar. The Russians were bombing Ukrainians for 2 or 3 or maybe weeks in a row, and after that they launched their offensive operation. We know that the last time when the Russians were using massive attack above the territory all over the Ukraine was in February and the beginning of March, so they had up to 2 months to collect and accumulate as much as possible rockets and missiles they have. Believe me, currently, I'm not saying that the Russians have like endless amount of rockets, but believe me, they do have a lot of missiles now, because during the previous few months they managed to accumulate the rockets significant numbers of calibers, missiles, daggers, and guided bombs, and they're ready. And if they start launching them, that means that they have some depot, some strategical level of rockets that they're not going to use, and now they have possibilities to start using them, but they still have strategic reserves. Believe me, it's like obviously. Now we're going to the South Donetsk area. As you can see, the relative icons, and this area, as you can see, currently is the most active all over the front lines, with the same situation we can find in Bakhmut. The Russians are saying that as a result of fierce clashings in this area, the Ukrainians lost a lot of soldiers. They lost around 131 soldiers. They lost around 19 armored vehicles, including 1 tank and 2 artillery systems. So as you can see, there are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians moved their reserves in this area. The Ukrainians managed to destroy 1 ammo depot in the town like Shakhtersk of 72nd Mechanized Brigade. So possibly the Ukrainians will make an attempt to capture Volnovakha and then to go further to Mariupol, as the plan of trying to force the Russians to move their fleet in Azov area. Furthermore, there is a brigade Vostok in this area. There was an interview of this guy, 11th Motorized Regiment Vostok. Their head of these forces answered the questions, and he told us, he was very clear, that there is a very high chances that the Ukrainians are able to penetrate the Russians in this area and to, within the next few months, to get Mariupol. And that was the words of the head of Vostok. Maybe that was some kind of speculation, and maybe that was some kind of a plan from the Russians to informational operation to show the Ukrainians that the Russians are weak and to force them to attack in this area. Who knows? But this is the fact, and this is the words that we heard today from the head of this regiment Vostok. And now let's talk a little bit about Donetsk area. Donetsk is under very heavy fire, as you can see. The Russians reported that they destroy one more time, the most hunted brigade, 110th Brigade in this area was attacked by the Russians. They lost another ammo depot. Also, the Ukrainians lost their positions in their ammo depot of the 53rd Mechanized Brigade in Achertina, and the Russians report about the attacking position of 93rd Brigade in Novonikolayevka. And this brigade is located in the South Ukraine. 93rd is located here, and they're trying to protect the Ukrainians and defend their positions in the South Donetsk front line. The same updates as before are coming from Liman and Kupinsk front line. The Russians are saying that as a result of fierce clashing fightings on Kupinsk, the Ukrainians lost 90 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. The same situation, 14th Mechanized Brigade is under Russian fire, 92nd. The Russians are saying that they attacked and destroyed the headquarters on 119th Territory Defense Brigade. And when talking about Liman, the same brigades, 81st, 58th in the vicinity of Serebryanka Forest, these very fierce clashings. The Russians are attacking positions of 81st, 58th, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost 75 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. And that's it about the situation on the ground. Soon we are going to become witnesses of the the historical battle, and not just the battle for Ukraine. This is going to be the historical battle between the Western countries and the Eastern countries in face of Russia and China. This is going to be the most important maybe battle of the 21st century. So we'll see. We'll see who's going to win and who's going to run after that. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds that we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, enjoy my Patreon. Have a good day. Bye bye.